Speeding.
All right, Corina. Prior to Princeton, did you attend public or private school?
So prior to Princeton, I attended public school.
Okay. And was that in the U.S. or overseas?
I attended public school in the U.S., in California.
Okay.
The first time you answered, your voice cracked a little bit. Could you say that again about public school?
Yeah, I actually...
No,
I got I think that's... Oh yeah, it's good, thank you. It's gonna get really...
Put it next to you if you
It's
want.
gonna get really hot in this room.
I'm scared.
Let us know.
Yeah, later on.
We have a fan.
Okay, so I'm gonna be here. Okay.
We can redo it, no problem. So, what did you attend public school in the U.S. or overseas?
I attended public school in the United States, in California.
Okay, thank you. And how did you prepare for Princeton, both socially and intellectually?
Prior to attending Princeton,
Yes. How did you prepare for it?
well, I was very fortunate in public school that I had public school teachers that really mentored me and prepared me with extracurricular activities that helped kind of form me socially, but they also helped me academically. I would go after school to my math teacher, for example, who would give me extra problem sets. So I took on extra work to get myself ready for a college experience. So really I had to supplement what I had received in my regular curriculum.
Okay.
Oh, is that the parade is about to start? Or
No.
they're warming up?
It's something, I don't know.
Oh my God.
It wasn't in the audio. The microphone's really close to her.
Okay, good.
Okay, that's good.
So what are we gonna do with that? 'Cause are we gonna keep it?
If it gets too loud, we have to stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know. All right. So, why did you go to Princeton?
Being from California, from a migrant farm working family,
Can you? Okay,
yeah. I was going to do it. Being from California and a migrant farm working family, I decided to attend Princeton because I felt that at that point in time, it was important to really expand myself beyond my sort of Southwest experience and my California experience. And I really wanted to come to school back east. There were a set of alumni in Northern California that sponsored a trip for me to come visit the campus. And so I visited and I fell in love with the campus in so many ways. I met really great students, and I was very fascinated by the curriculum and by its architecture and history. So I decided to make the plunge. There were a number of schools that I had been accepted to back in California that were premier, like Stanford and Cal and UCLA. But I thought that I would better be served in terms of my mind and my formation by coming out to school back east. And of course, Princeton has always been well regarded as one of the best schools in the country, if not in the world. So I was accepted, and I felt like I needed to take the plunge and go for the best.
Thank you, Corina. And what were your expectations coming in, and did Princeton live up to them?
I don't know if I had, in terms of expectations, I don't know if I had specific expectations regarding Princeton. I had a fairly open mind, but I did go through a bit of a cultural shock in the beginning, especially. I thought Princeton, and I was only because I was naive and had not traveled before, I thought Princeton would be more like California, and it really wasn't. The food was a lot different. I remember going to the student cafeteria, Department of Food Services, and being really surprised my first week of college that there were no tortillas. I was shocked. It was bagels and Lux, and I was like, "What's this? What's this Lux thing?" And so it was very eye-opening in the beginning. And I had a really good friend named Amparo, who was a little maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of me. Here at Princeton, who saw how I was dressed, because I was dressed very California style in like flip-flops, and at that time, you know, in the late 80s, it was a certain kind of flair, and she's like, she says, it's not gonna work here in the winter. And so she said, let's go to the financial aid office. So we did, and I got like $350, And she took me over to the local mall, and we bought boots and wool socks and wool sweaters, wool jacket, and so that I could survive the first, winter here, which I had never been through a winter before. So the expectations were that I would have a familial experience, I suppose, because that's what I grew up with. And in the Latinx community here at Princeton, I had that. I had immediately found friends and people from back home, from places. I'm from Soledad originally, but places like Hollister and Watsonville and San Jose and Los Angeles, East LA, and San Diego. So fortunately, because we were all very in tune culturally, we were able to find our own culture within the larger culture of Princeton, which I think a lot of students do. Being that it attracts such a diverse set of a student body.
Okay, thank
I'm gonna
you.
make one adjustment to the light. You can ask a question while I'm doing this. You can still ask a question while I'm doing this. At the same time.
I feel like I'm just...
Okay, check from behind.
I dare not move. You happy with it? You like it?
Okay.
There you go. Cool.
So, what were your initial impressions of Princeton?
My initial impression of Princeton was that I was really a fish out of water, especially in terms of socioeconomic and demographics. Not a lot of people look like me or were from my background here. And my roommates were very well endowed, and they had a lot of money, and I had none. When I got to Princeton, I didn't have any money from my parents. They didn't give me any money to get here, so I was on my own. And I think that was the biggest, wake up, I think, of all, was to understand that there are people who have a lot in this country and on this campus, and there are those that have little financially. Interestingly enough, though, I took a number of my very well-endowed Princeton roommates back to California, to Soledad, about junior year. And when they visited my household, they remarked that I was very rich in terms of love and family life, because a lot of them had gone to prep school or boarding school and didn't have what I had grown up with. And they hadn't experienced that before. And then I realized that wealth isn't necessarily defined by dollars, but really by your experience as well, and quality of friendships and love. And so I learned eventually, as I transformed through Princeton and evolved to become who I am now, which Princeton is very much an important part of. And as I changed through the years here as a student, I really changed my perception as to what defines wealth or not.
Very well said.
Thank you so much. That was great. Okay, and when you came to Princeton, Corina, did you feel like you fit in?
When I came to Princeton, I felt like I did not fit in. And a lot of that was not necessarily just ethnically, but I would say just from being a West Coaster. What we were going through on the West Coast, and sort of the way we comport ourselves and dress ourselves is a lot different than the way the students do here. And what we value in California, I think, is different than what people value on the East Coast, or at least that was my perception at the time. And so, for example, when I got here, it was interesting, the students dressed like very preppy-like, at the time. I don't really see the students really dressing that way now when I look around and I come back for reunions, but a lot of the students wore like khaki pants, and they had like the same kind of shoes and stuff like from LL Bean, and that was not me. I came here and I was like in mini skirts and flip-flops, and I had my big 80s hair and my bolero top, And so I'm like, and what I was dressed in was very appropriate for and popular where I grew up, and back here it was like, I was obviously not from like this kind of space or this kind of, I guess, background. I guess a lot of students had gone to school or prep school or anything and looked like this, and this is not what I looked like. So that was immediately what differentiated me. As I said, over time, I became more, I guess, assimilated to some of the stuff that Princeton was, because I had to, because of the snow, and I had to wear a jacket and get out of my flip-flops. But I think that was one of them. And then culturally, I think also just coming from a rural environment, a farm working environment, and moving to a place that really had people from all over the world, and people from I remember I went to school with a woman named Olga of Greece, and of Greece was like her last name. I wasn't sure, but it was really her designation as royalty. And I remember sitting next to her in class and thinking, this is like a lot different than what I grew up with, for example. And it was like that. We just had a lot of people here that were of very significant backgrounds in terms of standing, I think, but eventually what was really interesting, even though I felt kind of fish out of water when I first got here, as we kind of all went into the first semester, I think a lot of the students, no matter where they were from, suffered a certain amount of homesickness. And over the first year, especially with my roommates and all that, I realized that we were all more alike than unalike because of the human experience that we had. We were homesick, or we suffered breakups and heartaches, or we were we wanted this and didn't get that, it was more about us getting sick and helping each other when we got sick and kind of getting through the first year. And so I really realized that there's also a lot in common with the students that we think on surface we're so different. We actually aren't, and I think that was one of the biggest lessons I got out of my Princeton experience, was really understanding the human experience.
Awesome. And Corina, what was your major, and were there many other Latino students in your major? Did that play any role?
I was here at Princeton. I was a history major, and there were other students in history. What was remarkable at the time was if we wanted to do a particular study set, we had to bring professors in from other universities to help teach us. So we had visiting professors, because we didn't have a lot in terms of the Latinx curriculum, and not only in the history department, but in any department whatsoever. And if one wanted to sort of have a cultural studies, one had to do LAS, which is a Latin American Studies program, and a certificate in that program, or a concentration in that program. Now, fortunately, the university does have different, studies of diversity. So they do have, Latino studies and African American studies, and so the university has evolved, fortunately. But back when I was a student here, we didn't have those opportunities.
And did you take any courses that touched on Latino-related issues?
Yes, here at Princeton, I did have classes that were touching on Latino-related issues, and that was primarily because the students here, and we brought in professors from other universities, like from Rutgers or from the Southwest. There wasn't necessarily any Latino tenured faculty here. So it's not like we had it endemically, except for maybe a few professors. One who is deceased, and many of us felt was very popular, Michael Jimenez, Professor Jimenez. He was somebody that really took us under his wing, and was somebody that really brought us, through the college experience here.
Great, thank you. What motivated you to take the academic direction that you did?
When I was a student here, there were a lot of subject matters I was very interested in. It was really hard to decide whether I wanted to do and this was primarily in the liberal arts was what I was interested. It was hard because as I took various classes, I discovered I liked lots of different subject matters. But I settled in Princeton because I felt, into history because I felt it had a little of everything, and it had a lot of dexterity and agility in its curriculum so that I could study exactly what I want at any particular point during those years. Whereas some of the other subject matters were more defined. But I had to choose. Really, the two that I was choosing eventually from were between history and politics. And I eventually went into politics, and I don't think you necessarily have to study politics to go into politics, so it worked out okay.
Okay. And how would you characterize the intellectual atmosphere at Princeton?
The intellectual atmosphere at Princeton, I think, is, in my mind, singular. The students here are extremely smart. When I was a student here, it was amazing. I was almost in a state of euphoria by how smart people were and their backgrounds, how they were prepared for this academic experience here, but also their critical thinking skills were really fascinating to me and really on point. And it's one of the things I really love about the campus now and coming back to the campus is that I still feel that is really the students here are really smart, and the university fosters critical thinking, which I think is really important for being a contributor in society. I think some schools may be more about amassing a knowledge and then repeating it through a test. Here we were judged by, and perhaps still judged by, how well you could offer an argument and a counter argument. And sometimes we were asked to take the opposite position of the professor. And sometimes these professors were had won, Nobel Prizes and everything, and they would tell us or dare us to say, okay, here's my position. Now you have to offer the opposite or a variation of the position. And that to form critical thinking and think for oneself. And that happened a lot in class, but primarily in the preceptorial format, where we come together in a small group, which has been a really great life skill for me, being in a precept. Being in a small group and being able to think critically on the fly has been something that I've been able to use in my career and my employment and so forth. So it was a good thing that I had that training or that background here at this university.
Thank you. And what was your thesis topic, and how did you find that experience?
The thesis topic, I think I'm going to pass on this question.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries. Corina, can you please describe your social life at Princeton?
My social life at Princeton was very broad. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was having groups of friends that were interested in lots of different things. And part of that was through my roommate experience or the clubs I joined. But it was also just people I met in class, and they would invite me to various activities. I remember being invited one year to Greek Easter event and going down to a field in the south part of campus and seeing a goat on a spick, being turned around, and they were having Greek Easter, and I got to experience what that was, and I now celebrate Greek Easter every year. And so that was one of the things that's just, I really reveled in, and I'm fairly extroverted anyway, but I really reveled in all that there was here and everything that I could gather. And I really became politicized in that process too. So being from a Latinx background, I evolved, I think, by starting to endow myself with friends from other backgrounds, especially in the African American community here, and hanging out with my Black friends and taking African American studies classes and, going through the fraternity and sorority experiences with them. That was significant for me. And especially in my life now, in the diverse community I live in now, it was very helpful for me to really kind of come out of my own skin and live other people's experiences with them. I think it's really important, especially for a lot of the social justice work that I do now, is to have had those experiences here. One experience that we had that was really significant, that a lot of the students of color here at Princeton were struggling with financially and having a 9th semester of financial aid. So the university at that time only would allow for you to have a 4-year experience. And there were a lot of students that needed to take time off and come back, and the university would say, well, if you come back, we can't help you financially with that. We can't give you a loan, or we can't give you any, grant money or anything. So we coalesced, a group of us from various backgrounds, and a lot of the activists here at Princeton, which I considered myself to be one in the Latinx community. But we got together. It was the Latinos, so that was the Mexican American and Puerto Rican students with Black students, and we went and we took over Nassau Hall and occupied a room there, and with the university president, and he was obviously quite upset. And I remember he was like physically shaking because he was so afraid, afraid of us, being in the same room with him, saying, we need a 9th semester of financial aid. And we were given a choice. We were told that if we stayed there and in the building, that we would receive a dean's warning. And I think you can only get like 2 dean's warnings. Like if you get one and if you get a second one, you're like expelled. So it's a very serious thing to get a dean's warning, or one could leave the building. So some students left and some students chose to stay. But that was really important because that started the university's trajectory of change to eventually get to, I believe, where it is now, which is that it's a needs-blind admission process where students are able to come here irrespective of their financial background, and they will be helped along the way through an endowment. But that wasn't always the case, and that had major repercussions on student life, including my own, where a lot of us that were of poor backgrounds, we had to work like 3 or 4 jobs to get through, whereas some of my roommates who had a lot of money didn't have to work at all. So that set them up for academic success, whereas the Latinx kids and the Black students and all of that, we weren't, not only did we come from backgrounds that were like disadvantaged and fiscally disadvantaged, we were on top of that challenged with having to hold down numerous jobs to get through just to eat, while our more affluent students here got to use that time to study. And so the system at the time we felt was very rigged against us. And that's why we decided to take over the building and put the university president at the time on the spot.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned you had a lot of friends here and your life was active. Can you tell me what you did socially, like what groups you were involved in, any clubs, or how you made your friends?
Well, here at Princeton, I was really interested in a lot of topic matters. So I made friends by joining various clubs. I was on the rugby team, so I had friends there. So some of my roommates, and I coaxed some of my roommates to join the rugby team with me so we could be together. I really became a fan of the arts here. It was free to go to the various like student theater groups and so forth. So I made friends with folks that were more creative types on campus through doing that. I pretty much, if there was something to do and it was free, which most of the campus events were, I'd do it. I'd see bulletins around campus and I'd see, oh, here's an opportunity to go to even like a religious service that wasn't mine, and it was being advertised, I would just go and I would show up just to see what it was like. So that's how I really had an expanded network here. And, you know, through my 4 years and even now as an alum, I have a lot of friends from lots of different walks of life because I kind of tried everything out, which is I think one of the wonderful things about this campus. And this is the advice I give to students is don't put yourself in a box. You know, this is a chance to really kind of grow out of your skin and evolve as a human being.
Were your closest friends during your undergraduate years of a similar background to yours?
I had some friends from a similar background, and they're still my friends. And I have many friends here who are not of my background, my political views, etc.
Okay. Did you join any eating clubs while you were at Princeton? Why or why not?
Well, I did join one of the eating clubs. Actually, you know, I actually bickered Tiger Inn. That was the first year that Tiger Inn was bickered for women. It was an all-male eating club. And I'd go and hang out there, and I felt like I could become a member. I didn't get in, but at the time what we were doing, I think was significant in the sense that we were blazing that trail for the last 2 eating clubs on campus to become not all male. So that was an interesting experience. I was a member of one eating club, but I found it to be very expensive. And I asked the university to allow me to have student housing with my own kitchen. So that's what I decided to do. But I spent a lot of time at various eating clubs, like maybe 3 or 4 different ones, and there was different kind of groups of friends that I had in each one. But I spent a lot of time at Terrace Club, and I had friends that would get me in, and so I ate there quite a bit. And one of the things that I really love about Terrace Club is that I was a very hungry student, and because I didn't have money, and I would go in and I would have a meal with them. So I feel like if I ever had money for myself, I'd go back and give it to Terrace Club so that they could continue to feed students that were from backgrounds that were needy like my own.
Okay. What was the relationship between Latino students and eating clubs in your eyes?
I think the relationship between Latino students and eating clubs was not a good one. The eating clubs back then were not necessarily very welcoming. There were some, but primarily they would attract certain kinds of students or subset of students. Like there was one eating club that was for Southern students or known to be for Southern, students from the South and I didn't feel it was a hospitable experience for Latino students.
Okay, thank you. And how did Princeton affect your subsequent life and career?
Well, for me, Princeton is everything. I am so glad I went to school here. It was an amazing and wondrous experience, and I come back here almost every year for reunions because I get to not only see friends, but I get to enjoy how beautiful this campus is. And
let's start from enjoy how beautiful this campus is.
Yeah. I'll start from the beginning. You want to tell them are we on the last question? I'd rather just kind of have them stay out there if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure,
just
sure,
finish
sure,
it up.
sure.
Are we almost done?
Yes, we're about to close out. This question, one more, and then.
Okay. Anyway, okay, go for it.
Okay. How did Princeton affect your subsequent life and career?
Well, I think Princeton was extremely important in my formation as a human being, and I think Princeton's everything. I love this place. It's a wondrous place. Even back then when I was a student 30 years ago, on my 30th reunion, and even now, it really opened my mind and taught me how to think, which is an important life skill. And we saw ourselves as being able to do anything in the world. And we also were taught that we should be in the nation's service. And that mantra has been transformed now through being in the nation's service and the service of humanity. that has carried through who I am as a human being in my workplace and in my adult life. The other thing that was really interesting about this at Princeton was how important or how serious people took the honor code. So the honor code is, a pledge to be on your honor. And it was around plagiarism, for example, but it was a lot more universal. It was about having honor and being true to your word and so forth. And so that was also something that I really take very seriously, being on one's honor, being honest, or having a moral compass. And that has been huge in who I am in my life as well. So it's a good skill set that I learned and acquired here.
Thanks, Corina. And then, is there anything that Corina today would tell young Corina?
I think that I wish that I hadn't taken certain things so seriously.
Hey guys.
I think.
Guys, real quick, before we get to that question, Karina, can you just talk about, because you went to school during a very interesting time in the world outside of Princeton.
Yeah.
Can you talk about specific events
Mhm.
that affected life on campus, or in your POV, based on your career work, how it even affected your chart here, your roadmap while you were here?
Okay. Well, there's certain things here that happened at Princeton that were.
You need to do not disturb.
I think you need to put a sign up. Yeah. So let me. I can't remember the question, but let me answer what he had said. So there were some things that happened here at Princeton that were hugely important. There was the fall of the Berlin Wall, which had a huge impact on student life here. And a number of my friends actually flew out to Berlin to help take down the wall. That experience taught me that I was more than I would say my parochial experience, having grown up in Soledad, and that I was a member of the world and of humanity, and that I had a certain kind of responsibility to participate in democracy in general, and world democracy. That happened. There was also at the time investment by the university in South Africa. And so I joined along with the divestment movement here at Princeton to divest from South Africa. And that was really important. And what's interesting now is a couple of days ago, met some students. I was just walking along my way, and they had a display of divesting from fossil fuels. So the university still has some work to do in terms of divestment. But it was really informative for me, especially going into a political career, of how much where money is influences and impacts policy, and how it could change the world, and it could make the world a better place, or it could make the world a worse place. And the understanding that if one uses and takes money around in different places, that you could have an impact for good and social good. Going back to the Berlin experience, it's very formative, and especially germane to now with what's happening with the Ukraine. And so what I saw and experienced here is highly personal to me when I experience what's happening in the Ukraine, because I feel like I get it, because I feel like I've been through this before, where a particular country is an oppressor, or a particular sort of mindset is an oppressive mindset. And so my Princeton days continue to influence who I am now and what I do today, especially politically.
Do you think that, because you introduced it, I just want to follow up on that. Do you think that Princeton, the university, the student body, does a good enough job, either through curiosity or whatever the barrier, of highlighting some of the issues that happen in the Latino community in that same way? Some of the oppression that happens in the Latino community, some of the environmental concerns that are happening currently in South
Yeah, when I was a student, one of the things that we were invited to was to look beyond ourselves. And I think the students invited each other because of our various experiences, but the university as well. And I'm not talking necessarily the trustees of the university or the institution of the university. I'm speaking more specifically of the professors, who weren't always necessarily in sync with what university policies were. They're the ones that were feeding us these ideas of protest and social justice and environmental justice. A lot of those terms that didn't really exist back then, but we were doing that work. Those terms exist now, but we were, before it became, more normative or labeled, the work was already happening, and it was really happening through the auspices and the patronage of the university professors here.
Do you have anything else, Marsh, before we do the closing out?
Actually, I do have one more question, because your experience really shows you had a curiosity for diversity. You attended clubs in different religions, you attended clubs for different purposes. Some of them were socioeconomic, for food, etc. But the question I actually have is, did you feel you were able to hold on to your authenticity when you were around non-Latino students? Did you feel you had to sort of code to make them feel more comfortable around you? Or were you able to sort of be yourself in those spaces, and that wasn't necessarily an issue you had to deal with?
One of the things that happened to me here at Princeton,
I'm still rolling.
Oh,
We'll be out there in a second.
Okay,
Wait,
because I'm at
last
the
question.
11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
can you repeat that again?
Basically, like just with the experiences of being on campus
Uh-huh.
around different groups, did you feel like you ever had to jeopardize your authenticity as a Latino?
Specifically with non-Latino
Yeah.
Students.
I think for me, it's to be a Latina back at Princeton and even now, there's a particular set of negotiating skills that you have vis-a-vis the sort of more mainstream community. I think within our own community, we have like our way and things that we can say to one another and speak in Spanglish, have understoods and norms that we don't have to explain. With the more mainstream or more the outside community, outside of that particular community, it's not necessarily, where it's just seamless. There's some students are, they just don't understand culturally where one is coming from. And so you kind of have to, I guess, teach them. And so that's what I did. I explained a lot of my life experiences.
That
think
starts
that's-
at 11.
I think,
It's gonna be going on for
Yeah.
Marsh, we just missed our 11. There's a parade now.
the parade just started.
The parade starts at 2.
Oh, so what, the band's just practicing?
Yeah, the band's practicing. The parade starts at 2, and there's pictures at 1
Okay.
right here. So you're gonna have a lot of noise here because all the classes
we were
come.
told at 11 this was
Yeah,
good.
they told us from 11:30 to 12:30, this is when it was gonna get,
Yeah.
They're not
But-
gonna stop.
No.
But basically, just to answer the question, you do have to code switch. You do back then and even now.
Yeah.
You do have to code switch. It is what it is.
Is that a learned technique that you would
Yes.
say
It's not.
has come that you still carry with you, that has helped you in life? Or is that something that you feel you would have preferred to have grounded yourself more in who you were
Uh-huh.
and not have done that?
Well, code switching is a survival skill.
Yeah.
And that's today and yesterday and 30 years ago when I was a student here. When I was a student here, what I realized was externally people saw me in a particular way with having a last name like Lopez and coming from where I came from. So I decided to really wear that on my sleeve and I became radicalized in it. You know, whereas where I grew up in my high school was primarily, I mean, mostly Mexican American students. So it was like not a thing where we had to have our identity because we were all of the same identity. And we were all on the same wavelength, right? Because we didn't have like very many white students. I think we had like one black student and a few Asian students where I went to school growing up in my public school. But when I got here, it was a lot more diverse, and I felt in some ways somewhat oppressed or put down for being who I am, and that made me feel like, well, I had a choice. I could either wear it on my sleeve and be proud of my roots or downplay it, and I chose the former. I decided to be proud of my roots. So like, for example, in my freshman year, my first week of college here at Princeton, we had an answering machine. Back then, there was like a physical answering machine before cell phones. And I had 3 other roommates. 2 of my roommates from Long Island. And I was gonna go touch the answering machine to see if I had gotten any calls. And remember, I was very homesick and hoping for my family to call me. And I was told by my roommate, this is what she said. She says, no spick is gonna touch my stuff. And that was my first week at Princeton. And I did experience a lot of that at Princeton. I was called a lot of names. I was hurt quite a bit. And so I decided to become proud of who I was, that I wasn't gonna let anybody take that away from me.
Wow. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So like the stuff that's rolling, like are we able to edit it or no?
Say that one more time.
Like are we still rolling or?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's going on?
We can, okay.
You'll hear a cut when we cut.
Okay.
All right.
Oh,
I think that was all set.
Oh, no, the last,
No,
the younger advice question.
Yeah.
What would
What
you?
would Corina today
Say.
tell young Corina? If there's anything that,
I think the Corina of today would tell the Corina of 10 years ago, 30 years ago, the same thing. And that is not to let people get under your skin or get the better of you. Not to let anybody take your joy away from you, and to just flourish and flower. What I did at that time was to try everything out, but also by feeling confident and secure in my skin and projecting myself. I think that back then I was trying to figure out who I was, but I was who I was already then. I just didn't understand. I didn't understand how to put words to it, you know? And I have broken a lot of barriers intentionally because of my experience here. My experience here taught me that I was breaking barriers here. When I got out of here and I ended in politics, I decided by intention to be for the first Latina to run for the school board in my community, in a community with a lot of Latinos, like almost 40% or around 40%, and decided to run for city council and be the first one from the Latinx community, male or female, to serve on the council and represent a community that had a lot of Latinos, right? So you want to have an elected leader. And I decided to break lots and lots of barriers because I felt I had to, because of what I figured out here was that I was breaking barriers here, and that there are still barriers that have to be broken out in the larger community, which this place prepared me to do, because not just because of Princeton, but in spite of Princeton. And I learned to become who I am in the world, especially in politics.
thank you, Corina.
That's a cut.
Okay. Can you please give me your name
Yes.
and your class year, and then spell your full name?
Yes. My name is Corina Lopez. I'm Princeton University class of 1992, and the spelling of my name is Corinalopez.
And hold on, we're not done yet. Let's close this.
I was like,
What? I know you guys are already.
Add the grade class? The grade? You don't want to add the grade in front of it?
Nah.
It is what it is, just like the blazer. I feel you.
Just like, you know,
I
it's
know.
too hot. There's a big, the Latino group is meeting right now in the other room downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, across this hallway.
Yeah, I saw that.
You guys are gonna go over there? No.
Yeah, she hasn't played the catch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Which
we
play?
definitely-
Which
we
play?
definitely would've hung out.
Which play?
playing.
Oh,
Yeah,
where are you going?
North
Where are you going home?
Airport.
Oh, where are you going?
I'm going to Miami. I have to
Oh.
go take care of some things down there.
Oh, it's gonna be hot down there, but it's nice. It's a nice place. Okay, what
Okay,
else?
She's all set. Let's try it again.
One more time. Okay, can you remind me?
I'm still
Yes.
Okay.
Please give me your name and your class year, and then spell it.
My name is Corina Lopez. I'm Princeton University class of 1992, and the spelling of my name is Corinalopez.
Sweet.
Right, and cut. No, speeding. Here we go. Cut.